Welcome to this Explainer. Today we're taking a really deep, objective dive into one of the absolute most pivotal moments in early Islamic history, the Battle of Uhud. We're going to be breaking down the brilliant military strategy involved, the frankly devastating human cost, and how modern academic scholars actually analyze the ancient texts that recorded the whole thing.
So think about this for a second. It's a question that is literally echoed through history. How does an army, brilliantly positioned and initially completely victorious against totally overwhelming odds, suddenly face a devastating reversal? What happens when a single, rigid command is broken in the heat of battle? Well, that is the central, high-stakes hook of the conflict we're about to unpack today.
Here's our roadmap for the Explainer. We'll start with the setting of Uhud, then move into military strategy and forces, hit the turning point, discuss the heroes and martyrs, and finally, look at an analysis of Sirah traditions.
All right, let's dive right in with Section 1, the setting of Uhud.
Now, the terrain here isn't just a backdrop, it's practically a primary character in our story. Mount Uhud is this massive, rugged structure of volcanic rock. We're talking over 1,000 meters high of dark green, black, and red granite. Prophet Muhammad deliberately chose this specific terrain to provide a natural barrier for his army's rear, essentially funneling the battlefield to neutralize the enemy's massive numerical advantage. And a key feature here is Archer's Hill, which, as you'll see, becomes the absolute focal point of the entire clash.
Moving right along to Section 2, military strategy and forces.
Just look at these numbers. The disparity was genuinely terrifying. The Meccan Quraysh, commanded by Abu Sufyan, brought anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 troops and 200 heavy cavalry. On the other side, the Muslim army, especially after 300 men abandoned them, was left with a mere 700 fighters and just 50 horsemen. Massively outnumbered, the Prophet delivered a morale-boosting speech, emphasizing that the Ummah was one body and that absolute brotherhood was absolutely crucial to protect Medina.
So, chronologically, this conflict definitely didn't happen in a vacuum. The Quraysh were heavily fueled by a deep desire for revenge following their humiliating defeat at the Battle of Badr a year earlier. By Friday, the Meccan forces had arrived and settled at Uhud. The Muslim forces marched out to meet them, securing their positions overnight. By Saturday morning, the ranks were firmly organized, leadership banners were assigned, with Imam Ali holding the main banner of the Muhajirin, and the fighting commenced.
Now for the really pivotal moment. Section 3, the turning point.
At first, against all odds, the Muslims' tactical discipline paid off. Despite being completely outnumbered, they gained the upper hand, pushing the Quraysh back. But then came the fatal mistake. The Prophet had stationed 50 archers on that rocky hill we mentioned earlier, under the command of Abdullah ibn Jubair, with explicit, strict orders never to abandon their post, regardless of victory or defeat. Well, seeing the enemy retreat, 40 of those archers assumed the battle was already won and actually left the hill to collect spoils. This disobedience literally inverted the outcome of the battle. Khalid bin Walid, who was a brilliant tactician for the Quraysh, immediately saw the opening. He swung his 200 horsemen around the unprotected flank and attacked the Muslims from the rear, plunging them into total chaos.
But here's what is truly fascinating about the aftermath of that flank attack. You'd think the Quraysh would just wipe out the Muslims and march right into Medina, right? Instead, historical sources indicate Abu Sufyan's forces retreated in a state of fearful frenzy. By abandoning the battlefield without seizing spoils or taking prisoners, they missed a totally open prime opportunity to capture the city, allowing the surviving Muslims to eventually recover and regroup.
Which brings us to Section 4, Heroes and Martyrs. The ancient texts are just packed with these incredibly poignant personal anecdotes. Take Amr ibn al-Jamu, for example. He was an older man with a severe limp, which technically excused him from battlefield duty entirely. Yet he insisted on fighting, telling the Prophet, "I want to walk into paradise with my limp." He was martyred that day. This represents the deep personal conviction and absolute unwavering dedication of the early Muslim fighters.
Then you have the incredible story of Abu Dujana. The Prophet offered his sword to whoever would do it justice, and Abu Dujana stepped right up. Closely watched by Azubair ibn al-Awam, he defeated warrior after warrior. At one point, he raised his sword to strike a fierce opponent rallying the Quraysh, only to realize it was a woman, Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan. Abu Dujana deliberately lowered his weapon, stating the Prophet's sword was too pure to strike a woman, which perfectly highlights the strict chivalric codes deeply embedded in these historical narratives.
And speaking of women on the battlefield, let's contrast these two concepts. Generally, Islamic rulings prohibited women from combat to protect their dignity. At Uhud, women initially attended only to supply water and treat the wounded. But when the battle descended into chaos and many men fled, individuals like Nasiba dramatically altered their roles. Seeing the Prophet in direct danger, she picked up a sword and a discarded shield, sustaining injuries while physically defending him. It proves a fascinating legal and historical principle in these texts. Absolute necessity overrides general rules.
70. That is the recorded number of Muslim martyrs who fell at Uhud. This included legendary figures like the Prophet's uncle, Hamza, known as the Lion of Allah, and Hanzala, a young man who had rushed to battle straight from his wedding night and whom early traditions actually say was honored by being washed by angels.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Section 5, Analysis of Sirah Traditions.
So these stories of martyrs and miracles are undeniably powerful. But how do modern scholars actually view them? To understand this, we need to clearly define a crucial academic term, hagiography. In modern historical studies, early sirah, or prophetic biography, is often viewed not just as a dry recitation of military facts, but as hagiography. This means it's a branch of literature that deliberately blends historical biography with spiritual lessons, idealizing its subjects, and recording their miracles and merits, or manaqib.
So when modern researchers, like the folks at the Hadith Research Center, apply historico-critical methods to texts like the Hadith of al-Maghazi, the accounts of the battles, they are actively searching for hagiographical elements. When they look at early biographers like Waqidi, Ibn Ishaq, and Ibn Sa'd, they are analyzing how the story was told, not just what happened.
And what they find is super interesting. When academics neutrally unpack these findings, they see fascinating textual discrepancies. For example, Waqidi includes a story of a predictive dream the Prophet had before the battle, but Ibn Sa'd and Ibn Hisham totally leave it out. There are also differing facts. Some biographers credit Hamza with killing the enemy champion Arda, while others credit Ali. Furthermore, scholars trace distinct sectarian influences, noting how certain authors emphasize specific figures to align with emerging Shiite tendencies. It reveals the very human, and sometimes political, hands shaping the narrative over time.
This really captures the modern academic consensus. Early Sirah material absolutely contains historical facts, for sure, but it also underwent modifications over the centuries. Stories were reconstructed to idealize figures and impart essential spiritual lessons to the Muslim community rather than just acting as objective, straightforward military data logs.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Whether we're studying the archers on Mount Uhud or really any ancient historical event, we have to ask ourselves, are we seeing the exact objective events as they occurred second by second, or are we viewing the idealized, lesson-filled memories of the generations who wrote them down? It definitely challenges us to view all historical narratives through a sharper, more critical, and deeply analytical lens. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history you read.